Hello, everybody. Welcome to Devcom 2022 here in Cologne, Germany. I am Jim Shilts. I'm the head of community at Incredibuild. And with me today is Shifra. Shifra, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Shifra. I'm the head of sales development at Incredibuild. And what Incredibuild does is accelerate software development for any teams that have long compilation times. So gaming is a perfect spot for us. And I'm very excited to be here. It's my first Gamescom. And then here with us today we have Marie.
Yeah, so I'm not from Incredibuild. I do appreciate Incredibuild during my days as a programmer. But yeah, I started as a programmer back about 14 years ago in game dev, and I transitioned to be a game designer, senior lead, associate director, and director. And now I run my own company, my own advisory, where I help different studios with their games, to help publishers to evaluate games and games pitches coming to them. And I also do a lot of hosting and speaking at events. And I've also been in esports for about 20 years in roles like caster, analyst. I've been a coach for a North American Smite team, and I've been driving one of the very early female gaming tournament operators and websites. So yeah, it's been a really good run.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So you've got a few talks you're doing here this week?
Yes. Let's see. Later today at 5 p.m. local time, I'm having a talk in game design. And that will be about kind of taking your game pillars further. Game pillars is something like a very established concept in game design. And I think they're insufficient. And a couple of studios that I worked at, I found like ways to kind of refine them and build onto that model and add more things that makes them a little bit more clear, a little bit more aligned, a little bit more understandable and easier to work with. So my talk will kind of go into these models and these things that I found and try to share it with the wider community. And then I have a fireside chat tomorrow with the makers of Kings of Fighters, the very legendary classic fighting series that came out in '94 and is still going strong. Released Kings of Fighters 15 earlier this year and had a bunch of interesting announcements at EVO, just 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to kind of drill a little bit deeper, both talking about like the history of the franchise, like how many people did it take to make a game back then, but then also kind of how had it evolved and like what is the culture inside of Japanese games? Like, do these people actually do martial arts? Like I want to know, like this kind of stuff. And they recently introduced crossplay, so I want to ask them like, where are the better gamers? Obviously, what is the master race, between like PlayStation and PC?
Controversial.
Right, very controversial. And a couple of their announcements regarding like rollback netcode, which is a new concept. Well, it's not a new concept, but in the fighting franchise genre, they're slowly kind of all implementing this. So it might have been a bit controversial. I'm going to ask them about this, and they say they have a good response, so we'll see what that is. And then I talk a little bit more about, I think they have an esports program as well to learn more about what that's like. And go a little bit like deeper on the personal level to be like, what does Japanese game developers do when they meet up? What do they talk about? Do they play games? Do they play each other?
They just beat each other up?
Yeah, right? and then there's a couple of rumors. There's actually a rumor saying that the people behind the original Kings of Fight, that they were also working on the original Street Fighter. So I want to get, we got to get these couple of things confirmed. It's also said that the game was supposed to be a side-scroller, that they made a big shift in development. So there's a couple of rumors out there, and now I'm going to get Oda-san. Yeah, I have it ready. I got Oda-san, like 1 to 1. I'm going to, put him to be like, all right, tell us what's the truth here. How does it actually work? So I'm really looking forward to that. And then my last appearance is on Wednesday. It's an invite-only event that Esports Insider is having, where I'm on a panel on how we can increase diversity and inclusion and accessibility of esports broadcast and make them a little bit more angled towards people who might not have as easy to process the information, different kinds of information, but also to new beginners, who are coming to the game, who never played it before. How can we make sure they can watch and they can kind of follow and have an understanding of what's happening, that is not only catering to the pros and the amateurs, so to say.
Yeah, I don't know if there are very many fighting games that are catered toward women, are there?
Well, esports is the same. I feel like they're both
Yeah, you're not wrong. There are a lot of actually women playing esports though. Despite all this, who's been able to see through this because the main driving force in esports is about the competitiveness, but also the team feeling in the team games, of course, to be able to succeed with your team and to play with a team, you can do that. But you know, like to make a game cater to women, don't like or like. Just make it neutral. Just don't have the things that repel women. That's all you need to do. I mean, if you look at The Sims, would you say like it's clearly angled? There's no ponies, there's no Barbies, there's no especially pink stuff. But there was a lot of women on that dev team. They just made a neutral game and it just became really popular both for men and women. So they're an example of a game who actually made just don't do stuff that repel it, right? So
That's a really
just
good point.
basic things, yeah.
Yeah,
I love
it's
The
pretty
Sims. I feel like that was
straightforward,
such a
right?
good example because it is just so neutral. Like,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, so it's out there, but then it's also about the community a lot. You know, like if you like, I advise a lot of companies on their games, and one of the recent discussions that I had, they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna implement voice chat." I'm like, "Have you guys thought this through?" You know, like. Not only is there's like some people are gonna sit in their kitchen, you know, and you're gonna hear their mom in the background. Some people are gonna have like different languages and they're gonna get annoyed at each other. Some people just start socially chatting when you're trying to like focus and kind of win. But then especially the ones that have really like young boys who have really young voices, or someone in puberty, or also like or anyone with a female voice, they're gonna have, if they don't talk, then they're gonna have the competitive disadvantage if they're too shy to talk, or they have to put themselves out there and the risk of harassments, and none of these are
Not fitting
good
in,
good things. So
That was when I remember when Xbox Live first came out, and then everyone was voice chatting with the little behind the head headsets, and that was all it was people trash talking each other, and it was intimidating either for me, to be honest, like, oh my gosh, you don't want to speak up, and then people just jump all over you. But I can imagine if you're a child or a woman or somebody who maybe even more susceptible to.
Yeah, but well, I wouldn't just say just more success. Like there's always the harassment, there's also the toxicity, but it's a different thing when it's directed to your gender. That's when it gets personal. Someone is trying to get you for you, kind of thing, and that's when it's a little bit harder to kind of shake off. And so that's why it's a wider issue, I'd say.
So
sadly.
I wanted to go back to King of Fighters though, because you brought back so many memories. I was in college at the time when that game came out. I remember they had it in our like cafeteria area. They had that. They had Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo or whatever the newest one was at that point. And both of those games always had lines. I could never play. Everyone had their quarters up and stuff. So you mentioned all the consoles and everything, but are people still playing on the arcade machines as well? Is that how they compete, or is it only on consoles now?
So it is cross-play, but you still have the kind of arcade sticks, so to say. So it's not a big arcade machine. It's more like an elevated controller that is a little bit bigger than a Nintendo Switch, and that has these kind of, but it mimics the controller for an arcade. So there will be like the 3 buttons here, the 3 buttons here, and then there'll be kind of the free flow joystick, so to say. And anyone who is really serious about any Street Fighter, Tekken, or any of these fighting, they will have one of these. Actually at Evo, like that happened 2 weeks ago, that was the first prize, the grand prize, is to get like a gold-plated one branded by the game, because that's they all need that, and they need a high-quality one that's durable, has a quick response time, and it's easy that is reads off really well what kind of move that they're trying to do. So the hardware is really important if you want to be good at these games.
Yeah, I mean I guess you would have to play like that with all of your fingers. It's similar to if you're trying to play a first-person game and you're playing with a controller and someone else has a keyboard and mouse. You're definitely going to have an advantage.
That's an advantage. Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much you. Yeah, you should have that if you're serious about your stuff. But that goes for a lot of stuff, and you can connect these as well with USB to the computers. Another game that's in the same vein about is Rocket League. Well, you can play Rocket League with your keyboard or mouse, or you can also play it pretty well with a controller without any really big disadvantage. Or FIFA, usually people play with a controller as well to stay competitive. And some games you can kind of have play on similar terms, but in some games like strategy games or FPS games like the PC will be the match race. Usually as game developers, we do add, there's some handicaps and stuff that we can put in. For example, aim assist is something that is known as little bit cheating. But generally, we do put that in for console games just to even the odds between the platforms. So it's not about making it easier, making cheat. It's just about literally just balance it,
fair,
right? Yeah, because it can be that much harder to find a position sometimes if you're trying to do like a big scope or a big move or something. Yeah, and acceleration is another thing that we always need to use for stuff.
I used to play every day at 5 o'clock. We would shut down the office, and then there were like 8 of us in this office, and we would play Half-Life Deathmatch, the original Half-Life, and all keyboard and mouse, of course, right? But then when the Xbox came out and Halo, and we played Ghost Recon on Xbox Live when that came out, and trying to play with the controllers, I got so frustrated because you couldn't aim. It was just it was like playing through water almost.
Yeah.
I think switching is also hard for people when you're used to one for so long.
Yeah.
A little bit, but there'll also be the natural disadvantage in depending on which kind of game you're doing. Like one thing that comes to mind, I think, of all the games I have, the one that is the hardest to play is Call of Duty on Nintendo Wii from like 2003.
Oh, I remember that. You used to
yeah,
aim.
it's just awful.
Some
It's
people
like
love
playing
it.
GoldenEye, or like what is it playing GoldenEye? You guys remember
Well, with
GoldenEye?
that, you got to hold it like this or something.
Yeah, and it was kind of running like, yeah, no, it was.
No, some people love that though.
I know.
The
I
Wii
mean, if you
version.
get good at it, you can get pretty good at it, but you know, it's.
Yeah, it was a
takes
learning
little-
curve. My nephew had it on the
Yeah.
Wii, and so we played it at his house, and I was like, I can't do this. But he was
No.
super proficient. And
Yeah. Once you, I mean,
the
once you
Wii
get
just
it
made
down.
it made us all look a little funny. Like I feel like I spent so much time either fishing or golfing or like doing very funny
Yeah.
things on a Wii. Where it's,
I think my favorite was the kind of the Raving Rabbits. So they had this kind of mini Olympic mini games, fun but kind of brutal. Little rabbits doing some stuff, and you can kind of compete to with your friends. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
the Wii was awesome. My parents are older; they're 80 and 75, and they have a Wii, and they still play it. And when, like the grandkids come over, they put the Wii bowling on, and it was just something
Why
to do.
not?
oh, Wii
Yeah.
bowling.
Yeah, but bowling and boxing
great.
and it hasn't changed. They're copying the sport. The formula is not changing. So
Right.
that's why these classics are still valid today, right?
Yeah.
Well, they are.
So speaking of classics,
Oof.
we want to ask you a question. I want to
Dun,
know
dun,
what your what your favorite all-time
God.
game is, and like
This question.
I know it could be a long answer.
Which
but
genre?
Any genre.
Yeah,
I
that's
can't
the whole
say that.
fun. You have
Any
to
platform.
Pick one.
No, that's not happening. You know, it'll be
So-
it will be like in every different genre have like a top 3. But
So
you
let's say
can't
fighter
compare them.
games because I feel like that's on theme for your talk.
Soul Calibur 2, Kill It.
I played that on the Xbox.
Dreamcast.
No, Dreamcast. That's where I played
Yeah.
it. Yes. Oh my gosh, that was so much
That's
fun.
a great game. That's my favorite one.
Why is that one your favorite?
So between like, so Street Fighter, I think Street Fighter was kind of on a hiatus, or I wasn't playing Street Fighter at the time. Maybe it was just me around that era. And Tekken was pretty popular, but Tekken compared to Soul Calibur is a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate, so to say, like you're kind of locked into the animation a little bit. Whereas I always felt like Soul Calibur was a little bit more responsive, which I thought was really fun. And then I like, especially Killick, because he's not one of the kind of big tanky dudes that hit really hard as well. He's pretty quick, but he also has a staff that makes him reach really far. So I was able to just perfect the fights without anyone even getting close to me. So it was a little bit too easy maybe. But I enjoyed it. I was single player, okay?
It was, yeah, that was set itself apart too because of all the weapons in it. The other ones were all just fists, right? Or most of them. You like,
Or some ranged attack that they're throwing,
yeah.
you know.
yeah, maybe Mortal Kombat, they have the scorpion
Hadoukens.
things and yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, I love that with all the different swords and there's somebody had like chains and
Yeah. Celeste, I think. Oh no, don't call
or like was a sword that turned into a chain or
Yeah, that's well, there's two. There was a young girl who looks pretty Germanic or Swedish that has a sword. I think her name is Sophia. And then I'm not sure if it was Celeste or something like that, the one who had a chain that could become like pretty long or be shorter at different times. So yeah,
Okay.
a little bit Bayonetta feeling about that character, I remember. But yeah, it's been a while.
Makes me want to get a Dreamcast again just to play that game. I love my Dreamcast. It died so fast and I was so bummed.
I still have. So I have a funny. So funny. I wouldn't say funny. It's a little bit of a long. It's not too long. Okay. I got my first console was actually a Famicom when I was 5 years old, and so I played all these games. I played Zelda, and it was all in Japanese, and I didn't understand where to go. And I played it 20 times, never understood where to go, never got into Zelda because it was all in Japanese, you know. But I played a lot of other classic games, and I love that console. And then at some point, maybe when I was 8 or something, it stopped working. You know, like the glitch starts happening with the power cable, and you kind of know that this is bad because back in the days, I mean, now the console looks really nice, and you can kind of have them out as status symbols in your living room. Back then, we always put it back in the box, you know. So
really?
It kept getting a little bit worn, some wear and tear, and eventually closed down, right? But I carried this Famicom with me. This was, you know, like if you know some Batman, like Iceman, like this is my dead wife, you know. This is literally my dead wife. I was carrying my family, and you know, I've moved to Canada. I live, you know, I worked at Warner Brothers and Inos. I've been to Vancouver, to work at Capcom, and then I didn't get to work on Street Fighter though, sadly. And then I moved to the UK, and now I live in Germany basically. And I brought this thing, and then this one day, like you won't believe it, I'm meeting so I have a friend from NSA, and she comes to kind of Cambridge where I was living because I was working for Jagex to make some RuneScape, and she just brings she's like, I'll bring my old friend. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I sit and talk, and then the rest of the evening I'm just talking to this guy because he's a collector of Famicoms and old consoles, and he repairs them. I'm like,
my new best friend.
An opportunity fell into your lap.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see and you know, I told him he's like, oh, what does it say? I'm like, family computer. He's like, that's not what the real one says. He's like, you must have a pirate one. And then he tells me he knows everything. He knows this is the factory that was green lighting after nighttime when they were doing for Nintendo. They were doing this, released on this brand, and this real popular in Russia, and these in Brazilian. He knows everything. He's like, but I never heard about it. And he's like, I want to see it. So we had this kind of opening ceremony, you know, and it's like he's like a surgeon on an operating table, and you know, he's my Famicom, and he's like, I'm like, how bad is it, doctor? You know, like, and then he's like, and he's like, so this is burned, and this burned. He's like, oh, look at this ship. This is like original, and this. Oh, I've never seen this. It was just like. It was such a treasure for him, and it was such exciting. I'm like, so can you fix it? You know? And it took him a year, but he fixed it.
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome.
So
that's a real labor of love.
Yeah.
I feel like the whole story, like you carrying it around because it's important to you, and him like spending a year fixing it.
And I had to kind of push him as well because he had a lot of projects. You know, he's one of these people with a lot of projects. So he only gave it on my last day before I left the UK to come to Germany. And so I'd already shipped all my stuff, so I had to just like send it by like a royal mail or something, you know, in a protected case to my destination. So while my shipping stuff took like 3 weeks to come, this one came after like 3 days, you know.
The first item.
So the only thing I had, I literally in an apartment, I had my phone and my Famicom, and that's all I had. So I just reminiscence for like 3 weeks, and it was just like, oh, this game, oh, I think I know what's happening. Oh no, this music, oh my god. It was just like, it was amazing. It was such a blast from the past. I'm like, oh, what is the name of this game? I'm like, Circus Charlie, you know. And even like more interesting is that like during this time when it was before it was fixed, I actually went to Tokyo Game Show, and I took the time off my schedule to go to Akihabara, the game district in Tokyo. And I went to Super Potato, which is kind of known as the kind of old retro game store, and I bought an original Famicom that was refurbished. So I have 2 Famicoms now, because during the time I got a new one.
Wow.
It's a little bit different though. So like on my North American TV, I think it's black and white, because there was just like this slight difference in the TV formats, which in Japan, even though they inherited from the US, there was still a slight difference. So it's not the same to play on that. But then I tried to find the games, and what I realized is that I actually had a pirate cassette back in the days. Because I'm like, where's the cassettes with 126 games? And he's like, yeah, that's a pirate. They don't do that.
They
I'm
say
like,
126 games in one cassette. You already know it's sketchy.
Yeah, I didn't get. I mean, as a kid, I didn't know. I thought everything was fine. You know, everything was legal.
You were like, I'm doing great. I have 126 games.
Right? And I was like, how did you afford it? I'm like, just the one cassette, you know? Yeah, but no. And then I also tried to buy the games. But the thing is, like, so I'm in Akihabara, I'm looking for the games that I'm kind of remembering. There was one with like this kind of spaceship, and then there's one that's like a bullet hell when you're going up, and I can kind of like hum some of the songs. But there was no, you're going around there in Tokyo and in the shop, and there's no sounds. You just see the cassettes, and you see the paper kind of the paper outside of it, and then you can look at the cassettes. And there's no screenshots.
Yeah.
Back
Right.
they didn't have screenshots. It was just concept art.
Yeah.
So based on concept art, I had to try to find these games. So I
Wow.
bought 3 space games of like this spaceship, and I finally found one of them was right, and it was Gradius.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
found that, and I found the track and field that was simpler, Excite Bike, Robot, a couple of these like really old Nintendo games, and so I had a couple of them to play, and then I got to borrow a pirate CD from the repair guy as well. So I have 100 other games, some that I still haven't played. Those released back in the days that I didn't have on my console. So it will be like a fake blast to the past, kind of
Because you never played it
Because
the
I never
first time?
played them in the first place, right?
Would you sit and play them now? Like, is that something?
Of course.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah.
When I need some time off, this is what I do, and what I really love is 2 things. So early in the mornings when I was, a kid, I would try to get up before my brother, because then I could play for longer. Because when my brother was in line, we had to take turns, whenever he came awake.
Absolutely.
But now I could just so I still love going up in the weekend mornings and just booting up a console and playing like one of these old games, and I
Yeah.
still really, really enjoy that actually.
They are, yeah. So
Oh.
great.
Yeah, and then sometimes in the summers, because it's life quality. It is, and I can say it now without being ashamed for being a geek or wasting my
No,
time.
that's
with life.
you time.
This is
You
like,
get to
this is me
sit and
time.
yeah, exactly.
It's amazing. I love
And those
it.
games, you could pick them up and play them for 10 minutes, and like now
Yeah.
they're so cinematic, and you get really drawn into them, and like 4 or 5 hours can go by, and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what do I do with the day? But those games, yeah, you could play through them for shorter sittings, I think. Plus, I remember I played. Do you remember the Intellivision, the Mattel one?
No,
You didn't play that? It had like the weird phone-looking controller with a disc on it.
no, I didn't know that.
And you slid. Oh,
Yeah.
well, the buttons were so hard to push that you wouldn't last very long. Your thumb would get sore. You're like, okay, well, I can only play for 30 minutes. I'm done.
Very user friendly.
Right.
Yeah, well, it was a similar thing though with the track and field, because when you were running this, you had to like button mash,
Quickly, yeah.
so your controllers were kind of breaking all over the place. But you were really, but I had a turbo controller, so I just needed to press the turbo
And hold
button
it?
and
Ah,
hold it. So it
cheating,
was
cheating.
cheating.
No,
right?
you use a pencil and you put it on your finger and you go like that. That's how you do track and field.
Really? Man, you should have told me when
Yeah,
I
I
was
was
5.
gonna
I would
say,
have
it's a
beaten
great
my
trick.
brother
We didn't
every
know that either.
time, right?
I did that to one of my friends. He's like, what are you doing? Perfect.
Yeah, no, that is cool. No, I got a lot of good memories from back in those days and the consoles, and I still really appreciate that. But one thing though that is a little, I wouldn't say disheartening, is that I remember struggling with Sonic. I remember struggling with a lot of these games. Like one of my favorite games is called World of Illusion. And I remember, playing them and not getting there and whatnot, and also the Lost Vikings. And then now as an adult, I play through them in 20 minutes. And I played through the whole thing. And I'm like, what? I didn't remember, it just feels like
You think it's lost its charm because it's
Yeah,
less
a
challenging,
little
right?
bit.
You don't have
It's
to
less-
fight it as much.
it's not
right?
it's not how I remember it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's already over, but
Yeah.
but I
I
guess
remember
saw
going to
everything.
school, like on certain levels, like back when we were playing, Mario on like the little colored Game Boys. Like we would go to school and talk to each other about exactly where we got stuck in each level.
Yeah.
So you'd write it down so you could remember to go ask your friends if they had
Oh.
gotten past it, and if they
Yeah.
did, then how. You know what I mean? Like it was like a time when
Yeah.
we couldn't Google it. We couldn't check on YouTube. You
Yeah,
couldn't
no,
like
you couldn't do that.
yeah, like you had to go ask people how they did it.
Ninja Gaiden is another game that is famous for exactly what you say, because it's a as game design, game design has evolved. But back in the days, we made it stupidly hard for the sake of it. so for Ninja Gaiden, you had to actually like memorize a path, because there was no
Yes.
way you could react in time. And this is also true for some sections of Donkey Kong, by the way, in some of the harder levels when there's these kind of ducks happening and you need to
Yeah.
know
Exactly
what
the same
exactly when
type,
it-
yeah.
you know that one.
Exactly what you're saying.
You know that one, right? Yeah. So back in the days, you kind of had to memorize and kind of know what you're doing and how it's gonna go. So I think we have two more minutes.
2 more
Oh my
minutes.
God, this went by so
It really did.
fast.
I know. We could talk for
right?
another hour.
Yeah.
No, but I was real quick before we wrap up. You were talking about Donkey Kong. Have you seen the King of Kong documentary
No.
about the guys competing for the best Donkey Kong score? Oh, you have to watch it. It's crazy. These guys, they like have grease pens and they draw on the screen the patterns and where they're supposed to go, and it's really nuts. And then there's all this
Really
controversy
fun.
around it. It's really good.
Honestly, I will say this: like Donkey Kong Country, especially, was that's a master lesson in game design and in level design and how they do it, because they kind of introduce the need for you to master the mechanics slowly. First, it's just enough to jump. Then you need to do a max jump, and then you need to do a cartwheel jump.
Right.
And master these things. And it gets harder and harder over time. So you can really begin early on, and then they adapt the levels so that you have to kind of use
The
these
skills that
a
you
little
learned
bit
in the
more.
last levels, yeah.
Yeah, and they really build that up in a really good way, and that's even today as game design, I would say study that game.
Relevant.
It's relevant.
Cool. Well, Marie, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you. It's
We
been a
really enjoyed talking to you.
pleasure.
You have fun plans for while you're in Cologne?
There's a couple of evening events happening every day, and then of
Yeah.
course I have speaker engagements today and tomorrow and Wednesday, and then a couple of business meetings with studios that are interested in getting some of my help or some of my
These all sound fun.
workshops, and it'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank
I look forward to
you.
seeing you
My
all week.
pleasure.
Great to meet you, yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you guys.
Alrighty, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back with the next interview in just a few minutes.